Hello, my name is Jenny Sjöholm. I'm a conservation specialist and senior lecturer in urban design and conservation. And now I will present some of my research focusing on Kiruna and discuss its being conceptualized as a model town. And more specifically, I will explore the idea of Kiruna being a model town and see how that affects the town planning in the currently ongoing urban transformation. And this study, it draws on planning documents, literature, where Kiruna has been described in various ways over the years, and also media reporting during the urban transformation period. But first, a few words about company towns. They can be described as being something that is built and administered by a single company, usually a single company that is establishing themselves in a scarcely populated region in order to extract natural resources. And the incentives to build the towns are economic. And oftentimes, historically, these company towns were planned and organized and managed from a quite paternalistic kind of way. And it's also possible to see different kind of typologies when it comes to these company towns. One is to see that model company towns developed, where there were high ambitions when it came to the town planning, with the housing, and by different kind of structures and supporting systems, such as schools, churches, places for leisure time and various activities in the towns. Sometimes adjacent to these model company towns and company towns, service and supply towns developed. And the idea was to have a town that wasn't controlled by the company, but provided housing, shops and other facilities by the public, let's say. And if you have model company towns on one hand, the quite opposite can be defined to be shanty towns. And that is towns that was built on sites of the natural resources taking place, but not being orderly planned, often being shanty towns, temporary buildings built by the workers themselves or whatever building materials they could find. And just from a very pragmatic kind of view, and not causing very pleasant living environments, obviously. So, moving on to Kiruna. It is a mining town, having the mining company LKAB being one of the main employers. Today, the town has about 18,000 inhabitants, and it is located in a sparsely populated region. So a key back when Kiruna was founded, but also now today, is to make sure that it's an attractive built environment that people want to live in, because what the council want to avoid is to have people fly in and fly out just to be working in the industries. Kiruna was established in 1900, and when it was established, this was done intentionally as a contrast to Malmberget, 120 kilometers south of Kiruna. Malmberget was built as a shanty town, and it had very poor housing. It had poor social conditions, and it was a national disgrace. So in order for LKAB to get the permission from the state to actually open the mines, they had to reassure that they would provide a better living environments and better housing than was the case in other mining towns at the time. And originally, when Kiruna was developed, it was developed at three separate areas. It was the company area, it was the adjacent service and supply town, and the railway being very important in developing Kiruna and shipping the heavy iron ore cargo. A separate railway area was also developed. And these three areas function as different areas until 1948, when they merged and Kiruna was granted town rights. And gradually, ever since, Kiruna has been developing step by step. A first development period between, let's say, 1930 until the 1960s. A lot of things happening in Kiruna during the 1950s and 60s. And then gradually even more from the 1960s and onwards. So, is Kiruna a model town, as often is said nowadays? Well, it is quite clear that when Kiruna was first established, it was designed as a model company town. The terminology might not have been used by the founders and by the architects at the time, but they did have very high ambitions, developing the town plans, designing the buildings, finding out which function should go in the town, and providing high quality of housing. Moving on, reading literature about Kiruna from the 1940s, 1950s, it is quite obvious that the company area that was controlled by the mining company was thought of as being model. It had housing of very high standards for the time, but the same couldn't be said about the other areas, the service and supply town or the railway area. These areas was poorer, they couldn't really invest in infrastructure, in sewer systems, in water supply, and so the way they could in the company area. So there was differences in the standards between the different areas of Kiruna at the time. The idea of Kiruna as a model town, it became established during the 1980s. Initially, it was highlighted in research taking place at the time, describing the history of Kiruna and highlighting the high standards and the high ambitions when the town was first established. This research in turn influenced the conservation planning of the time. Kiruna got the conservation plan in 1984, and when you read that conservation plan, you can see that it was heavily influenced by the research highlighting Kiruna being a model town. And when Kiruna was designated as a National Heritage Site, the conservation plan was influential in this as well. And in the revision of the National Heritage Site in 2010, it was also explicitly stated that Kiruna is a model town. And what you can see in this kind of conservation planning in the various planning documents is that the concept of Kiruna being a model town has been geographically broadened. From initially when Kiruna was first established, the model town referring to the company area, it gradually transformed so it now includes the whole of Kiruna, the entire town, not just the company part of it. And what is interesting following the urban transformation is that talking about Kiruna and making visions for the new Kiruna, the idea of Kiruna as a model town has also been emphasized quite a lot. And the new Kiruna is being envisioned as being a new model town if you look at planning documents, but also look at how it is being discussed in the media by people working for the local council, but also by the politicians in Kiruna. And what you clearly can see now is that the model town, it refers both to a physical, historic, built environment, the original idea of the model town, and the physical remnants of that model town, as it is manifested in historic environments and historic buildings and places. But now you also have the idea of a model town. It's more a model town as a concept that is relevant in these discussions discussing the new Kiruna and the future model town. And in a way you can see there has been a shift in mindset from the material to the more immaterial aspects of cultural heritage in this shifting perspective. And there are different visions and ideas that different stakeholders have how the new Kiruna should be developed. And both draw on the interpretations of Kiruna as a model town in arguing their visions and implementing their ideas of what Kiruna should look like in the future. On the one hand, drawing on the physical built actual model town that has a lot of buildings and environment still existing today. Then there's an idea of conservation of the historic buildings that represent the model town means relocating these buildings and implementing in new context as the urban transformation progresses. But you can also see a competing narrative to this, where the idea is promoted that the new Kiruna should be built in the spirit of a model town. Not in the spirit of a model town as it was 120 years ago when Kiruna was first established, but according to contemporary planning ideals of what the town should be like, in terms of being a sustainable and attractive place to live in. And what the actual outcome of the urban transformation of Kiruna will be in the end, it's a little bit too early to say today. The urban transformation has started, but it will be a few years yet until it can be evaluated to see what kind of model town and what the reminiscences of the original model town is kept in the new Kiruna.